Hello everyone. Today in this video I will tell you how to approach a newborn with the pathological neonatal jaundice. So whenever you find a newborn with the jaundice, first thing, is it physiological or pathological? So how will you define the pathological neonatal jaundice? So any jaundice which appears in the first 24 hours of the life is always pathological, and if it persists beyond 14 days of life, then also it is pathological. Between 1 to 14 days of life, it can be physiological or it can be pathological. If you find that the total serum bilirubin is more than the expected cutoff value for the physiological range, then you have to go for the investigation to rule out the various causes of pathological jaundice. So any jaundice in first 24 hours and beyond 14 days is always pathological in full-term child, and in preterms up to 3 weeks physiological jaundice can persist. And in between this, you have to see the progress of the jaundice, and if you find that serum bilirubin is rising at more than 5 milligram per dl per day or 0.2 milligram per dl per hour, then you have to find out the cause. And if the total serum bilirubin at any point of time is more than 15 milligram per dl, you have to screen the baby for the pathological. And if the direct bilirubin fraction is more than 2 milligram per dl or more than 20% of the total serum bilirubin, then you have to go for the workup. And if you find that yellow palm sores anytime, because it correlate with this total serum bilirubin more than 15 milligram per dl. So if you find that child is having the jaundice up to palm sole, then you have to find out the cause of the pathological. And if the child is having the signs of acute bilirubin encephalopathy, then also you have to do the workup to find out the cause. Now, according to the time of onset of the pathological jaundice, we can make the short list of the causes of pathological neonatal jaundice. If the jaundice is appear within 24 hours of the life, then most probably it is due to the blood group incompatibility, example RH and ABO, and it can be due to some infection, example TORCH, sepsis or UTI. And if it is not there, then you have to find out the other causes, example G6PD deficiency, hereditary spherocytosis, alpha thalassemia. And if there is no evidence of the hemolysis and infection, then you have to work up the for Crigler-Najjar syndrome, Lucey-Driscoll syndrome. So these are the common causes which is present within 24 hours of life. And if the jaundice is present between 1 to 14 days of life and you are suspecting that this is pathological jaundice, then it can be exaggerated physiological jaundice, or it can be breast milk jaundice or breastfeeding jaundice, or it can be due to the sepsis and urinary tract infection, or sometime it is the neonatal cholestasis in which the direct bilirubin is more than 20% of the TSB, as seen in the neonatal hepatitis, extrahepatic biliary atresia, and it can be due to some metabolic disorder, example galactosemia, tyrosinemia. So according to the onset of the jaundice, we can investigate the baby further. If the child is having jaundice after 2 weeks of the life, then we have to check, is it the indirect hyperbilirubinemia or direct hyperbilirubinemia. If it is persistent indirect hyperbilirubinemia, then first we have to work up for the hemolysis as in RH and ABO and G6PD. Then you have to find out, is it breast milk jaundice after excluding all the causes, and go for the thyroid profile, because hypothyroidism can lead to the indirect and direct both. And if the intestinal obstruction, then it will lead to the pathological jaundice as seen in the pyloric stenosis. And if it is not, then Crigler-Najjar, Gilbert. Gilbert is very rarely causes the pathological jaundice. Only when the child is newborn is having the another comorbid condition. Example, if the newborn is having the G6PD deficiency also and Gilbert syndrome also, then it will be presented in the newborn period. Otherwise, Gilbert is not present in the newborn period till it is associated with the other comorbid condition. And in Down syndrome also, persistent indirect hyperbilirubinemia is seen. And if it is direct hyperbilirubinemia, then you have to rule out, is it due to the hepatocellular damage or it is due to the biliary obstruction. So in this there are various causes: neonatal hepatitis, sepsis, Torch group of infection, metabolic disorder. In this the damage to the liver will be there. And if it is obstructive, then biliary atresia, choledochal cyst can be, and congenital atresia or paucity of the bile duct, Baylor disease can be the possibility. And hyperalimentation associated cholestasis is very common in the NICU because preterm babies especially usually on the total parental nutrition for a long time. So in this it will lead to the cholestasis, especially the soya product in this. And hypothyroidism can causes the both indirect and direct hyperbilirubinemia. So always we have to go for thyroid profile. Now we have to screen the baby. So what are the screening tests if the jaundice appear within 24 hours of the life? So whenever newborn is having the pathological jaundice, you have to screen the baby for hemolysis and infections. So for hemolysis, to rule out the hemolysis, you have to go for the total serum bilirubin level, direct and indirect bilirubin fraction, hemoglobin, reticulocyte count, and blood group of the mother and baby both, and direct Coombs test, DCT, and peripheral blood smear. So all these are the screening tests whenever you find that newborn is having the jaundice within 24 hours of the life. If there is evidence of hemolysis, example increased total serum bilirubin and indirect hyperbilirubinemia, and hemoglobin is decreased and retic count is increased, then see the direct Coombs test, is it positive or negative. If it is positive, then go for the blood group of mother and baby. If you find that mother is Rh negative and baby is Rh positive, then it is Rh incompatibility or Rh hemolytic disease of newborn. It is generally seen in the second baby and onward. And if Rh blood is positive in both, but mother is O positive and baby is either A or B positive, then we label as a ABO incompatibility or ABO hemolytic disease of newborn. In Rh incompatibility, DCT is strongly positive, while in the ABO incompatibility, it is weakly positive. And when you will go for the peripheral blood smear, then in Rh incompatibility, you will find that nucleated RBC, while in the ABO incompatibility, there will be spherocytosis. You will find the spherocytes in peripheral smear, but it is less than 20% of the total. If it is not there, Rh and ABO is not, then mother is A or B positive and baby is having any blood group, then it can be due to minor blood group incompatibility. Example, Kale and Duffy. In this, you will find that DCT is weakly positive and child is having all the evidence of hemolysis. And in peripheral blood smear, non-specific findings are there. So this is the workup whenever DCT is positive. If DCT is negative, then see the morphology of the RBC in peripheral blood smear. If specific and characteristic RBC morphology, then we label as a RBC membrane defects. Example, spherocytosis, when the more than 20% spherocytes are present in the peripheral blood film. Elliptocytosis, stomatocytosis, all these are the RBC membrane defect. If the RBC morphology is non-specific, then you have to go for the G6PD deficiency and pyruvate kinase deficiency. So go for all these enzyme level. And for the confirmation of RBC membrane defect, example in hereditary spherocytosis, we have to go for the osmotic fragility test and other genetic study. And If the child is not having RBC membrane defect and enzyme deficiency both, and evidence are suggesting that there is hemolysis, then you rule out the alpha thalassemia major, in which electrophoresis will show the BART hemoglobin. So all these are the causes of pathological jaundice in which child will have the evidence of hemolysis but DCT will be negative. If you don't find any evidence of hemolysis, and child is having the increased total indirect or plus minus direct serum bilirubin, then go for the sepsis screening test. In sepsis, both indirect and direct hyperbilirubinemia can be seen. So if you find the positive sepsis screening test, in sepsis screening test we have to send the CBC, complete blood count, in which we have to check the WBC count, platelet count. So WBC can be less than 5,000 or more than 25,000 will be significant, suggesting that child is having infection, and platelet count can be decreased. When you will go for the CRP level, it will be increased. So all these are the sepsis screening tests. If it is positive, then we can label that child is having the septicemia, and due to this child is having the pathological jaundice, and then you have to confirm it by sending the blood culture and send the CSF examination and urine culture, because UTI can also lead to the pathological jaundice. So whenever you find the child with the pathological jaundice, also rule out the urinary tract infection. If the sepsis screening tests and the confirmatory tests are negative, then you have to send the torch titer. So torch group of infection is generally associated with the pathological jaundice. If torch titer is positive and child is also having the all the symptoms of the torch group of infection, I example IUGR, hepatosplenomegaly, Pateki, micro or hydrocephaly, meningoencephalitis, then it is the due to TOSH group of infection. If TOSH titer is also negative, if you find that IgM antibody against the TOSH is negative, then go for the liver function test, renal function test, urine routine microscopy and culture sensitivity, and go for the USG abdomen and KUB to rule out pyelonephritis or hepatitis, which can lead to this. So there are various causes of neonatal hepatitis in which child can have the pathological jaundice, and pyelonephritis can also lead to the pathological neonatal jaundice. If you don't find any evidence of the hemolysis and infection, and total and indirect bilirubin is raised, then rule out the deficiency of uridine diphosphate glucuronide transferase. It can be acquired or it can be congenital non-hemolytic jaundice. In acquired, it is Lucey-Driscoll syndrome, and it is due to transplacental passage of UGT inhibiting substance. It is a transient condition and it is present in first 4 days of the life in newborn, and it is rarely severe enough to need the exchange transfusion. Generally, it responds to the phototherapy. And in congenital non-hemolytic jaundice, it is Crigler-Najjar syndrome. It is of two types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is autosomal recessive, and in this complete absence of hepatic UGT activity. And in this always total serum bilirubin is more than 20 milligram per dl, and in this generally newborn will need the exchange transfusion, and there is risk of irreversible brain damage, and in this treatment is liver transplantation. While in the type 2, it is also known as Avia's disease. So it is autosomal dominant mainly, but autosomal recessive can also be. It is more common than the type 1. It is benign and it responds to the phenobarbital, while type 1 does not respond. So this is very specific. If you are suspecting that child is having the Crigler-Najjar and bilirubin, total serum bilirubin is less than 20 milligram per dl, then you can start the phenobarbital. In type 2, child generally respond to this, while in type 1, newborn will not respond. If the Newborn has presented with the jaundice between 1 to 14 days of life, and then again you have to rule out the hemolysis and sepsis. If there is no evidence of hemolysis and infection, then this can be exaggerated physiological jaundice. In exaggerated physiological jaundice, you have to take the detailed history of the mother and the newborn, and also you have to physically examine the newborn. So in mother, there are various risk factors which can lead to the exaggerated physiological jaundice in newborn. If the age of the mother is more than 25 years, and if it male sex, if mother is having the diabetes and oxytocin induction was done, and if there is history of inadequacy of breastfeeding, and it will lead to the weight loss, dehydration and calorie deprivation. It is also known as breastfeeding jaundice. So it can lead to the exaggerated physiological jaundice. If there is delayed bowel movements due to any cause, example meconium plaque, so it will lead to the exaggerated physiological jaundice because of the increased enterohepatic circulation. If in physical examination of the newborn you find that there is cephale hematoma, it will lead to the exaggerated physiological jaundice. Prematurity is a risk factor for this. If newborn is having the polycythemia, hematocrit is more than 65%, and if you find that newborn is having the all the clinical features of the Down syndrome, trisomy 21, then it can be the cause of the jaundice. And also take the drug history, because vitamin K in large dose, and there are various drugs which is causing the hemolysis in G6PD patients. So always take the detailed history of the drugs. And there are drugs which block the Y receptor protein. This is the ligandin protein by which the bilirubin is transported to the liver and then converted into the unconjugated to conjugated. So this protein is very important for the unconjugated bilirubin to enter into the liver. So vitamin K and kanamycin are the few drugs which can block the Y receptor protein. And it there are various drugs which block the bilirubin binding site in albumin, example salicylate, sulfonamide, caffeine and furosemide. And there are various drugs which compete with the UGT. This is the enzyme which is necessary for the bilirubin to convert the unconjugated to the conjugated bilirubin. So example gentamicin, kanamycin, novobiocin and chloramphenicol. So we have to rule out the various risk factor for the exaggerated physiological jaundice. If there is no risk factor for the exaggerated physiological jaundice, then you have to think about the breastfeeding jaundice. It is generally seen in the first, second or third day of life. It is because of the inadequate breastfeeding which lead to the dehydration, weight loss and calorie deprivation in the newborn and exaggerate the jaundice. If it is not there, child is taking the adequate breastfeeding and on breast milk, then you have to think about breast milk jaundice only after excluding all other causes. It is generally present at the end of first week and it lasts up to 8 to 12 weeks of life. It is because of the inhibiting substance in the breast milk, 3 alpha 20 beta pregnenolone. It is excreted in the breast milk up to 8 to 12 weeks of, and it inhibits the hepatic conjugation of the bilirubin. And also colonization of gut is delayed in breastfed newborn. So increased deconjugation of the bilirubin and enterohepatic circulation. Also, free fatty acids in the breast milk lead to the inhibit the hepatic conjugation of bilirubin and also causes the increase in enterohepatic circulation. So all these are the causes of breast milk jaundice. If you rule out all these, then also take the detailed history and examination for the metabolic disorder and endocrine disorder. Example galactosemia. For this you have to go for the reducing substance in the urine, and if the newborn is having the vomiting, lethargy and hepatomegaly and having the jaundice, then rule out the galactosemia and go for the thyroid profile. If you find that newborn is having the raised TSH level more than 20 and all other characteristic features of hypothyroidism, then it can be the cause of the hyperbilirubinemia. In hypothyroidism, both direct and indirect hyperbilirubinemia can be seen. And if it is also not there, then rule out the neonatal hepatitis and biliary atresia. In this, mainly direct hyperbilirubinemia will be there. Direct bilirubin more than 20%, and you will find that dark urine color which even stain the diaper, and stool can be clay color. It is persistently clay color in the biliary atresia while intermittently clay color in neonatal hepatitis. Now, if the newborn is having the jaundice which is appears or persists beyond 2 weeks of life, then again see is it indirect hyperbilirubinemia or direct hyperbilirubinemia. In indirect hyperbilirubinemia, as I said before, we have to rule out the hemolysis infection, and if it is not there, then rule out the Crigler-Najjar syndrome, Lucey-Driscoll syndrome, and rule out the intestinal obstruction, hypothyroidism, Down syndrome, and other metabolic disorder. If there is direct hyperbilirubinemia, then we have to rule out is it hepatocellular or it is due to the obstruction in the biliary tract or it is due to the metabolic endocrinal disorders. And details of the direct hyperbilirubinemia I will tell you in my part 3 of this video series on the neonatal jaundice. Thank you.